Hello and welcome back to this I-24 News Evening Edition. I'm Lucy Arish, and this is the Daily Debate. The U.S. Senate passed a budget deal yesterday with $173 million of funding for joint U.S.-Israel anti-missile defense programs. And joining me tonight is Barbara Opel-Rome, Defense News, and Amir Oren, Senior Correspondent for Haaretz Daily Newspaper. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming to the studio.
Good evening.
My first question to you. We've been hearing for the last few months that Hezbollah is isolated, Hamas is isolated. The situation in Syria is actually in the benefit of Israel. Egypt with its own problems. Why does Israel need more money?
Well, this particular line item that you mentioned, anti-ballistic missile defense, goes back to the 80s. First, when President Reagan had his Star Wars program, the so-called SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative, and Israel was actually offered Patriot batteries before the 1991 Gulf War and turned it down because the Israeli Air Force didn't want it. And then Israel was hit by some 40 Scud-type missiles and changed its mind. And ever since, for the last 20-odd years, Israel is or has undertaken such a program. It can't stop in the middle, can it? So this is part and parcel of the ongoing program, and the sum you mentioned, almost $200 million, is nevertheless the petty cash compared to what Israel gets.
Yes, I agree. And I must preface this that this is only a small portion. When you add another $220 million for Iron Dome against the short-range rockets, it's the missile defense funding annually is about half $500 million. And to answer your question, Lucy, the threat still exists. The fact is,
although the deal with Iran, let me be naive for a few seconds, but shouldn't this save money for the United States?
Capabilities and intent. There might be a change in intent, but they still have the capabilities. I don't see any kind of degradation of their capabilities. The threat is measured by those two terms. And if they still have the arsenal that they do in Hezbollah and Hamas and Iran, it's a legitimate defense requirement that is roundly supported by both sides of Congress.
Regarding the Iranian Shihab missiles, Israel, of course, has no intention to wait until Iran has nuclear-tipped missiles and then try to shoot them out of the sky. The Arrow missiles, now we are in the Arrow 3 phase already, they are intended against a certain type of missile, certain trajectory, certain height. And the paradox of offense versus defense is that once you have a solution for a certain type of offensive weapon, the other side tries to go under or over, so you have to develop what Barbara mentioned, Iron Dome, David Sling. There are some 3, 4, 5 layers. Types of missiles for various layers.
So it's not a secret that the U.S.-Israel relationship is not that good in the last few months. It wasn't like the best in Obama's regime the last 6-7 years. Isn't it a little bit, and we are hearing Benjamin Netanyahu shouting a lot on the United States, on Barack Obama. Isn't it a little bit of a, how do I call it, chutzpah? to actually go every single time and yell at the big brother?
Well, you said that the U.S.-Israeli relationship has deteriorated. But if one wants to be more accurate, it's the Obama-Netanyahu, or if one should put it in a nutshell or as a bumper sticker, Obama or Bibi. Whom do you believe? Under these two leaders, the mechanisms, the bureaucracies, the permanent military and intelligence communities have the best of relations. So one has to make the distinction
right, yes.
between the political echelon and those generals or senior civilian officials whose relationship has never been better.
And also something that is an unfair perception of the Obama administration's animosity or some type of aloofness to the concerns of the Netanyahu government. It's unjustified because, in fact, defense and security assistance has never been stronger. The dollar value amounts have never been higher. The level of security and intelligence cooperation has never been closer under the Obama administration. And I'll just throw a few numbers if you care.
Yes.
So there's this $3.1 billion grant money in security assistance. It's called FMF funding, and this is a baseline number that Israel receives every year. And that, by the way, that constitutes more than half of the U.S. foreign relations, foreign support budget. So Israel is taking up 52% of U.S. security assistance funding.
And Israel has to buy the weapon from the Americans.
Of that, and Israel is the only country that of the FMF funding, they're allowed to take 26%, something like $815 million, convert it into shekels and spend it here in Israel for local R&D. So that's the $3.1 billion, which is more than 50% of the U.S. foreign assistance budget, and that means about almost 25% of Israel's defense budget. And then on top of that, you have $500 million a year in missile defense cooperative funding. Israel has enormous access to excess defense articles, excess equipment, older equipment that it can put its hands on above and before other allies. And finally, there's about $1.2 billion worth of U.S. weaponry that is pre-positioned, stored in Israel, that Israel can make use of if it in a time of need.
So I need to understand, in every relationship there is a give and take. A relationship is something about give and take. So what we're seeing now is that the United States is giving. Israel is taking. But where is the United States benefit in all this?
Well, all of the figures that Barbara cited are accurate, and there is a purpose, and this purpose can be latent. It does not have to be spoken about in adult company, but everybody understands what's at stake. The foreign military funding that Israel gets is only some 20% of its defense budget, and perhaps 4% of its entire budget. So ostensibly, Israel could simply give it up, as Netanyahu, when he was first elected prime minister 17 years ago, said he will go to Congress and announce. And Menachem Begin wanted to wean Israel of this aid. It never happens. Why? Because there is no flexibility in government budgets. The 3-4 billion shekels, or in the case of the U.S. aid, 11 million shekels, Israel cannot do without. And because it cannot do without, because you see the debates over domestic expenses here, the government could fall if this aid was to be stopped. And therefore, one aim of the U.S. assistance to Israel is to maintain governmental stability here. And the 1/4 also in convertible dollars that Barbara mentioned is meant to help some Israeli industries, plants outside of the Tel Aviv area, in Bet Shan or in the Negev, some places where unemployment will rocket if these plans were not to be budgeted out of this aid. This is, we are used to say that Jordan or Egypt are being helped by the U.S. in order for their regimes to survive. This is almost the same in Israel too. The Israeli government needs this assistance, and therefore it must take into consideration before it decides, let's say, on an attack against the Iranian nuclear infrastructure. The US will always say, listen, you're a sovereign country, you make your own decisions, we have our own interests, please consider our interests. So every Israeli prime minister, defense minister, chief of staff, Air Force chief, and so on and so forth, knows that Israel should be very, very careful not to tangle with the American national interest. And this assistance is part of the consideration.
Right. And Lucy, if you don't mind, I wanted to get back to your question, why it seems to be take and take and take. And also, as Amir says, this security assistance should anchor the Israeli behavior, Israeli policies in a way to at least not to contradict with U.S. national security policy. And in fact, lately there has been a question, not an assertion, but just they're starting to ponder the question of whether Israel is becoming, instead of a strategic asset, perhaps a strategic liability to Washington.
This is exactly what I want to ask. The American taxpayer, what is he asking in the street when he's seeing the way that Israel is acting? When he's seeing that actually America gives money, but it doesn't get a lot in return. More than that, it gets a lot of criticism.
But you know what? Wait. It's getting a lot more in return than the foreign assistance that it provides to Pakistan and so many other countries. It's a terrible thing to say, but compared to a lot of other foreign aid recipients, recipients of U.S. largesse, Israel is still a pretty good bet.
Also, except for the missile programs and these convertible dollars, most of the security assistance does not come in the form of dollars. It's vouchers. It's a voucher given to Lockheed Martin and Northrop and Boeing and other industries because Israel goes there and gets airplanes or electronic systems, which means employment for the U.S. economy. It means that the senators and congressmen voting for it know that in their states and districts there will be employment. So there are many stakeholders here in addition to Israel. But one additional benefit for both sides is that Israel should get rid of its anxiety. It's not, you asked a very rational question regarding the threat around Israel, but it's not rational, it's emotional. Israel has always demonstrated anxiety, and the US government does not want Israel to feel that it has its back to the wall, because if Israel becomes desperate, it could attack. So better for Israel to feel secure because it has enough material, enough funding, and it knows that after the next war, it has to get access to the US arsenal again. So this all weighs on the minds of the Israeli decision makers, and therefore the US gets value for its money.
In one sentence, Barbara, because we have 1 minute, would the IDF, the Israeli IDF, would look like it's looking right now without the US aid?
Absolutely not.
We've been there. We've been there with embargoes. We've been there with French assistance, which wasn't grant money. They sold Israel for some more expensive values. Israel could not survive, and the IDF would not be able to perform had it not been for US arms sales.
Like always, it's a great pleasure.
Thank you, Lucy.
A very inside look for what is exactly is happening. Thank you very much for this. And we're going out for a small break, 10 minutes break, and then we will be back for the I-24 News one-on-one. Don't go anywhere. 10 minutes break. Update from our news desk, and then we're back.